I was standing in the kitchen doorway, clutching the crumpled rent notice in my sweaty hands, when Dad slammed his beer bottle onto the table so hard it rattled the plates. "You're 25, Amelia," he barked, his voice sharp enough to slice through my chest. "If you can't afford rent, maybe you should learn to live on the street like the rest of the garbage out there." My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to speak. "Dad, it's just this month. I've been working double shifts. Before I could finish, his hand came down hard across my face. The sting burned, but what hurt worse was the laughter that followed. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments, from where are you watching this video? Mom leaned against the counter, sipping her wine, smirking like she'd been waiting for this moment. "You're pathetic, Amelia. Always begging, always failing. I told you years ago we invested everything in Mason because he has potential." Mason, my golden boy brother, the one who dropped out of college twice, burned through 3 startups, and still drove a brand new BMW thanks to my parents' endless handouts. He was leaning back in his chair now, arms crossed, smirking like a king watching a peasant beg for scraps. "Maybe if you stopped chasing stupid dreams," he said, "you'd have something to show for your life. But no, you're 25 and still working at a diner. That's on you." "I'm not chasing dreams," I snapped before I could stop myself. "I'm working to stay alive." Dad's fist came down so fast I didn't even have time to flinch. The next thing I knew, I was on the kitchen floor, the taste of blood pooling in my mouth. "You don't raise your voice in my house," he roared. "You want money? Learn to earn it. Homeless garbage learns faster." Mom chuckled, swirling her wine. "Pack your things, Amelia. You're done here. We've carried you long enough." I stared up at her from the floor, chest heaving, and something inside me cracked. It wasn't my jaw or my ribs. It was something deeper, something darker. I packed a single duffel bag that night. No goodbyes, no hugs, no explanations. I walked out into the cold with $47 in my bank account, bruises blooming across my skin, and a promise whispering in the back of my mind. I would never ask them for anything again, but I wouldn't forget. And one day, I'd make them wish they'd never called me garbage. The first week after leaving their house, I slept in my car behind a 24-hour laundromat, clutching my duffel bag like it was the last piece of dignity I had left. I worked 16-hour shifts at the diner, wiping tables while bruises throbbed under my sleeves. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Dad's voice, low and venomous. "Homeless garbage learns faster." And somehow he was right. I learned fast. I learned which customers tipped the best, which night managers would swap me an extra shift, and how to stretch a single packet of instant noodles into 2 days of meals. But I also learned something else. My family's entire kingdom was built on secrets. It started accidentally. One night, while refilling coffee at the diner, I overheard 2 men in expensive suits talking at the corner booth. "Charles Darnell's son Mason," one of them said, swirling his whiskey, "blew $500,000 on that crypto scam. If the investors find out, the Darnells are finished." My hand froze around the coffee pot. Charles Darnell. My dad. I retreated into the kitchen, heart pounding, and replayed every word. Mason had burned investor money? And no one knew yet? For the first time in weeks, a spark lit up inside me. I started digging. At night, after my shift, I sat in my car with free Wi-Fi from the diner, scrolling through public court records, tax filings, and buried business articles. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Mason wasn't just reckless, he was stealing company money. Fake invoices, shell accounts, offshore transfers. It was all there if you knew where to look. Dad had signed off on it. Mom had hosted charity galas that were actually laundering schemes. Even their perfect suburban mansion had a mortgage they were hiding from everyone. They had mocked me for being a waitress, called me trash, beaten me into silence, and yet they were the ones living on a foundation of lies. But revenge couldn't just be about exposing them. That would be too easy, too quick. I wanted them to feel what I had felt, powerless, desperate, discarded. So I waited. I played the part they expected me to play, the failure, the pathetic girl struggling to survive. I posted nothing on social media, no updates, no wins. I let them believe I was crawling through life while they reigned as untouchable gods. Meanwhile, I started learning. I took night classes in bookkeeping and financial forensics free through online programs. I befriended a few people at the diner who worked for small investment firms. I asked questions carefully, slowly, like a sponge soaking up water. By month 4, I had enough information to burn their empire to the ground, but I didn't. Not yet. Because something better fell into my lap. One night, a woman came into the diner mid-30s, sleek black dress, eyes like sharpened steel. She ordered black coffee and barely touched it. When I asked if she was okay, she laughed bitterly. You ever meet a man who ruins your entire life while smiling about it? I almost laughed too. You're looking at someone who grew up with one. That's how I met Evelyn Monroe, a former investor my dad had humiliated years ago when she lost money in one of his ventures. She told me everything, how Dad mocked her publicly, how Mason called her dead weight in front of other investors, how Mom whispered that Evelyn should stick to charity auctions instead of playing with the big boys. She hated them. And unlike me, Evelyn had power. Help me take them down, I said one night after my shift, sliding the fake invoices across the table to her. I know where their skeletons are. You know how to make people listen. She smiled for the first time. Oh, sweetheart, I don't want to take them down. I want to make them destroy each other. And that's when the plan changed. Instead of exposing them, we'd set traps. Quietly, invisibly, we'd feed them just enough information to turn against each other. Mason accusing Dad of withholding money, Dad blaming Mom for bad press, Mom tearing into Mason for ruining her image. By the time anyone realized what was happening, their unity would be gone, their support systems shattered, their perfect family would implode without me lifting a finger. I wasn't the girl they beat anymore. I wasn't trash. I was the fuse they didn't even know had been lit. And when the explosion came, I'd be standing far enough away to watch them burn. The night it all fell apart, I didn't plan on being there. That's the best part I didn't need to be. 3 months of carefully setting fires, and my parents were about to walk into the flames themselves. It started when Evelyn, my unlikely ally, leaked one tiny piece of anonymous information to one of Mason's biggest investors. A forged email that looked like Dad had pulled money out of the company's shared fund to cover Mason's gambling debts. It was believable because, well, it was true. Within days, whispers started flying. Mason stormed into Dad's office screaming, "You sold me out to cover your own backside." Dad bellowed right back, "I didn't touch a dollar. You think I'm cleaning up your messes for the rest of my life?" And then Mom waded in, slamming her wine glass on the counter so hard it cracked. "This is your fault, Charles," she spat, her face red. "I told you Mason wasn't ready to handle investor funds, but no, you wanted to parade your perfect heir around while Amelia scrubbed tables like a servant." The name hit the air like a knife. Amelia. Me. Mason froze. "Don't you dare talk about her," he snarled, but there was venom behind it. "She's exactly where she belongs, begging strangers for scraps. She's trash. Just like you always said, Mom." And in that moment, something shifted. Evelyn's plan was working. They weren't just fighting, they were fracturing. While they ripped into each other, I was miles away, watching the chaos unfold through carefully orchestrated phone calls and updates. Evelyn had planted 2 concerned investors at the scene people she knew would call her the second the family erupted. But we weren't done yet. A week later, Evelyn pulled the real trigger. She scheduled a surprise emergency investor summit and made sure my parents believed Mason had arranged it to repair his reputation. She told Mason that Dad was planning to throw him under the bus and pin everything on him. She told Dad the same about Mason. And then she invited every major investor, journalist, and board member they'd ever tried to impress. I didn't go inside. I waited in the parking lot with Evelyn, sipping burnt diner coffee while the storm brewed upstairs. It started calmly, I'm told. A slideshow about financial growth and family values, Dad's favorite buzzwords. But then, one investor stood up one of Evelyn's friends and asked, loudly, "Mr. Darnell, can you explain why these invoices show company funds wired to a private account in the Cayman Islands under your wife's name?" Dead silence. Psst. Mom blinked once, twice, then turned slowly toward Dad. "What the hell are they talking about?" Another investor stood. "And Mason," he said sharply, holding up a printed email, "did you really think no one would find the offshore bets tied to this account? Did you gamble our money?" That was it. Dad lunged at Mason across the table, knocking over a pitcher of water. Mom started screaming about being set up. Mason shouted over her, calling Dad a liar and Mom a useless socialite who burns money on fake charities. Every shred of their perfect image, the one they'd beaten me into silence to protect, went up in flames. And all of it was recorded. By the end of the night, their investors pulled out. The company collapsed within 2 weeks. Dad tried to blame Mason publicly. Mason sued Dad for fraud. Mom filed for divorce to salvage her reputation, but Evelyn had already leaked proof of her charity scams. The empire they'd built on cruelty crumbled beneath them. And me? I didn't send a single email. I didn't make a single statement. But I wasn't silent either. 2 weeks later, I stood outside their mansion, or what was left of it anyway. The bank had foreclosed, the gates were padlocked, and movers were hauling out the furniture my mother once called untouchable heirlooms. Dad was on the lawn, screaming into a phone. Mason sat on the curb with his head in his hands. Mom paced in circles, mascara smeared, muttering to herself. I stepped out of my car, wearing the uniform from my new job at a boutique investment firm, a position Evelyn had arranged for me after everything fell apart. Dad saw me first, his face drained of color. "You," he hissed. I smiled, small and sharp. "Guess homeless garbage learns faster, huh?" For the first time in my life, he had no words. I turned and walked away before he could stammer out a response. I didn't need to stay. They were living my revenge every single day, stripped of power, respect, and each other. The family that once called me worthless had nothing left to cling to. And I didn't even have to lift a hand. I just lit the match. They burned themselves alive. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.